Welcome to Suffolk Matters, where all of Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News, opinions, and insights you won't hear anywhere else. Here's your host, the president of New York's largest independent union, Suffolk AME's Dan Levler.
Welcome to another edition of Suffolk Matters on Walk 97.5 and 94.3 The Shark, where Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News and views you can't hear anywhere else.
So my guest this morning is Denis Quirk. He's the president of the New York State Court Officers Association. Dennis, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So, president of the New York Court Officers Association, it's not easy for everybody to understand what that means. So can you tell us a little bit of what it is your members do?
Well, court officers provide security in and around all of the courthouses in New York State. We handle, all the security of prisoners, producing prisoners in front of judges, but handling the security within the courtroom, and just general security for all court facilities.
That's great. And, I'm sure you have your hands full. There's probably a number of issues that crop up over the years. A couple of things come to mind. We had some vaccine mandates, especially, there was some pushback in Manhattan on that. Some of the folks were fine with the mandate. Other people were saying, you can't make that a term of employment without negotiating it. How did that shake out for you and your group?
Well, personally, I was in favor of the vaccine. I thought it was the right thing to do, but I also was a firm commitment that this was an individual choice, and every individual had the constitutional right to make a decision to accept or reject the vaccine. And, of course, the former chief judge mandated the vaccine to everybody, and we had a number of people who lost their jobs. We have filed, all the court unions joined together and filed litigation. We're in front of the Public Employment Review Board at the moment, and we're anxiously awaiting the decision for them that the chief judge violated our terms and conditions of employment by mandating the vaccine.
Sure, and there's some encouraging news on that front. I think it was police and fire. They ended up winning on their case, and folks got to return to work because, again, it was a non-negotiated change, and administratively they just walked in and said, "This is what you have to do." So fingers crossed on the work you're doing there.
There also is a second part to that is people who've gotten the vaccine have side effects, whether it be heart issues and other issues, who now have long-term ailments as a result of the vaccine. So what type of compensation is going to be made available to them? Is it going to be disability pension, or how do we handle that? Yeah,
and that brings up a fair point about what it means to be a labor leader, right? You're president of your union, I'm president of my union, and these are the types of things we look at all the time. We're constantly concerned about what's going on for working people and making sure that they are considered fairly. These are the folks that get the jobs done, not the decision makers at the top that say this is what I want. These are the people that actually go out and get it done, and we want to make sure that they're taken care of fairly. And, the fact of the matter is, you're right. There are folks that went out and got the vaccine and had side effects. There were folks that were vaccinated, got COVID, ended up still having long-term effects. And these questions are still hanging out there. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle it?
That's why, I'm a firm believer that it was an individual right. People, should never be forced to take any type of a vaccine or any type of medicine if they're opposed to it. So this is an individual's choice, and we cannot, as a country, be forcing people to do things like this.
Sure. And, we talk about, a couple of other things that are hanging out there for public employees right now. These are issues, you and I have discussed along with a bunch of other labor leaders. But one thing that we saw a number of years ago was there was a push on the state level to create a single-payer system for health care. And the unions, most folks didn't really understand why, but the unions had problems with that. And the reason being, throughout the years, we've negotiated contracts with our employers to set, pay and benefits, and part of those benefits were health care, and that health care had a certain value. And if single payer came in the way they were proposing at the time they were proposing it, it would wipe out years of negotiations and force public employees that had negotiated benefits to just take whatever it is the state was offering at whatever rate the state was offering it at. And this has been something, we've talked about for quite some time. There was a recent retirement in the Assembly, a main proponent of that was driving the bus, so to speak. But we're hearing this year already conversation in Albany that they might want to bring that back.
I think that everyone in this country should be provided with health insurance. I mean, we send billions of dollars in money overseas to Afghanistan and other countries. So there's no reason that people don't have health insurance. But public employees should not be penalized and have our health insurance benefits decreased and changed, because they want to provide health insurance to other people. And as you said, all of the unions have worked very hard, negotiated very hard. Many employees have given up other benefits to have the health insurance we have today. And we're not going to tolerate any changes in our health insurance. And any elected official who tries to force this single health insurance through, we will go after and try to have them removed from office.
Yeah, it's very serious. Again, just talking about how these things were negotiated, the value of what the health insurance is. We've even gone so far as to suggest to some of these elected leaders, just carve out folks that have collective bargaining agreements. If no one has any representation, they have no access to health care, and you want to provide it to them, that's great. Why do you need to go and change things that we've worked for years and years and years and convert it to this new system, which frankly, they were never able to, honestly answer us. What would be covered? What would the cost be? All of these very basic things that would start the conversation never even entered into the conversation. So just another, frustrating aspect of, representing working people in Albany is sometimes the folks that we're talking to don't want to hear and don't want to understand what it is we've worked for generations for.
Go back to Obamacare. When Obamacare came about, they told people there will be no changes in their health insurance, and look what happened to people. I mean, so you can't trust government. This is not something that we can trust anybody on. We've negotiated contracts, and we're not going to give up on our contract.
No, I agree. So just a couple of other issues I want to touch on, and it's specifically, if it affects your members, it affects my members, it's slightly differently, but, when they talk about these new gun laws that they've put in place, that's going to have an impact on members which have been, for your union, that have been trained and have professionally carried out their duties with firearms throughout their lives and now, may face a situation where when they retire, they no longer have access to a firearm.
It not only affects retired members, it affects public safety because law enforcement personnel who have been trained to carry a firearm and been trained how to handle dangerous situations now will not be allowed to carry their firearm in many areas of the state of New York, and that will reduce the level of public safety because retired people provide a tremendous amount of public safety and assist active law enforcement officers all the time.
Yeah, and you know what? You make an excellent distinction there. These are people that have been trained to do this. They're not, this is not just someone with a gun. This is somebody that was trained with a gun that knows all of the ins and outs of the law and the proper application and use of having a firearm.
And retired people are required to have training and be requalified every single year. So you're talking about people that are highly level trained, and if they see a woman being robbed in the street or they see somebody raping somebody, they see somebody beating somebody up, although they're off duty and now they're retired, they will interact there and help that person. So as retirees, we're there to help the public.
No, it makes a ton of sense to me, and this is a situation that's similar to, from my perspective, it's similar to things like bail reform and what they did with changes to discovery law. And we see now this year, the governor in their state of the state address said, she wants to give judges more authority when we talk about bail and what's going to be cashless bail and be able to consider, the dangerousness of a particular individual before releasing them. How have your conversations on that front been going?
Well, people who commit serious crimes, who rape people, rob people, assault people, stab, or, carry guns, returning them to the street, the record is very clear. Every day in the paper, you'll read they were arrested, they were returned to the street with no bail, and what did? They committed another crime. So the general public wants to be safe. They want to feel safe. And right now, the streets of New York City and New York State are not safe because so many of these people are being released to the street. Now, some of these people need to be held in bail, and some of these people need mental health. And it's a combination of both. And we need a system that's going to provide the public safe streets. And right now, we do not have that.
Absolutely. From my perspective, the way I've been looking at it is, there has to be a component of victim advocacy in all of this, right? So we want to make sure we're preserving the rights of the person who maybe did something wrong, but we want to protect the community from future harm as well. And, judges, I believe judges are an appropriate population of people to make those decisions, make those determinations. And so at least to me, it's encouraging to see that the governor is looking to include that in her budget.
I think the governor realizes this is something that has to be dealt with. The bail laws in the past were discriminatory to people in the minority community where they held people in jail on Rikers Island for $250 bail, and the family couldn't put up the money. So we needed changes in the bail law, but we went too far with these changes. And again, we need to give the judges the power to hold people, and we need to change the laws so that the public is safe.
Yeah, listen, it reminds me of a number of years ago, there was some proposed legislation to remove the authority of the New York State Comptroller from being sole trustee of the funds that he sits over. And the biggest concern that we had, in all of this process was handing over to the legislature the ability to make decisions like they made on bail reform, like they did on discovery changes, like they may consider on single payer. Having a sole fiduciary in charge of the retirement funds is a system that's consistently worked and is protected by the laws of the state of New York. And to make those changes, we thought that was just a very bad idea because, in all fairness, sometimes they make really great decisions as lawmakers, and sometimes they make not great ones.
Well, we have a great state controller in Tom DiNapoli who does a great job in managing the pension system for public employees. And we are one of the most best managed pension systems in the country, and we need to keep that pension system safe and away from the political people because they would take the money and use it for other things, and they would squander the money away.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, again, folks sometimes get the the misrepresentation that these are, six-figure retirements. And there are some folks that worked really hard and earned a bunch of money, and they make a little bit more in retirement. But on average, it's like $30,000, $40,000 a year. We're not talking about a major windfall, and that's in exchange for 30 years of government service, right? And if you're working in government service, your pay is reduced. You don't make as much as maybe the private sector makes because government doesn't pay quite as well because they offer some of this on the back end. So, just to get something out there about the retirement system, I know sometimes folks get upset about it and they say, oh, you guys are getting pensions and whatever else. You make less money and what you get on the back end isn't much, and it doesn't really adjust, right? So it's it becomes a fixed income. As cost of living increases, the amount of money that you receive does not increase. So there is sacrifice. There's altruism in a public employee when they decide to get involved in work and working on behalf of the people. There is sacrifice throughout their life, and they get a little something on the back end.
People who enter public service do make many sacrifices, and the pension is there to protect them in retirement. And when you compare public service to private sector in many cases is making 2 and 3 times what a public employee is making.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. So listen, again, I want to remind everyone my guest this morning is Denis Quirk. He's the president of the New York State Court Officers Association, representing the men and women throughout the court system, ensuring the security of everyone while they're within the court system. We spent some time this morning talking about where we see government maybe not getting it right. But on the inverse of that, there are times that they get it right, and they should be applauded. And, one of those instances, maybe a sticky point, but, I'm looking at the nomination of Justice LaSalle to the Court of Appeals. And I think some of the conversation I've heard out in the world is, kind of cherry-pick some cases, and they said, well, we don't like this particular decision or we don't like that particular decision. And the decisions that I read, I felt like they were consistent with the law. And I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but, do you have any insights on, this appointment?
I think that Judge LaSalle's, if you look at his history of decisions, his decisions are based on the law. They're consistent with the law. And judges are not supposed to write the law, right? Making the law is up to the legislature. Judges are there to enforce the law and to enforce what the legislatures have done. And as court employees who have worked with Judge LaSalle side by side with him in both Suffolk County before he went to the appellate division, and at the appellate division as both an appellate division judge and the presiding justice, they will all tell you that he is a fine gentleman. He is fair to everyone. He treats everybody with respect, and he treats the public with respect, and he treats the lawyers who come to court with respect. And that's what a judge should be. A judge is supposed to be impartial, supposed to be fair, and he's supposed to treat people like that. And I think the governor should be applauded for the selection that she's made in selecting him, because I think the court system presently, trying to recover from COVID, the public's rights have been seriously diminished. And I think we need somebody in there who's going to come in and manage the system and bring the system full force ahead to help people. We have women now who have no money to pay to feed their children. They come to family court for help. They're given a date 2 weeks, 3 weeks down the road. Then when they appear, they take a day off to work to come to court. The father of the children, the spouse, comes to the court and says, "Well, I want time off to get a lawyer." And they adjourn the case for 2 months. And sometimes it can take the woman 3, 4, 5 months to get money to feed her children. The civil end, the matrimonial for divorces, the court system right at the present time, we're in a state of chaos, and we need someone who is going to manage the court system and bring us out and treat everybody, treat the staff, non-judicial, the judges, and the public, okay, treat us all with respect and dignity.
Yeah, and, Justice LaSalle does have that history. He's part of an association out in Nassau and Suffolk that really focuses on the Hispanic community and raising them up, informing them of their rights, encouraging folks to enter into the legal profession and helping them do so with scholarships and whatever else. Just a very altruistic guy, around the board. But you make an excellent point. These are human beings whose lives hang in the balance, and sometimes it's not just maybe it's not just the wife, but it's the kids as well, waiting to figure out what the court system is going to do so they can eat, so that they can have clothes, so that they can, go about their lives and become whoever it is they're going to be. And it is very important, I think, also to mention Judge LaSalle's history has been in applying the law, right? Not trying to set precedent, not trying to legislate from the bench, quote unquote, but to take the law and say this is what the law says, and therefore under these circumstances this is the ruling. I sometimes feel, maybe this gets me into a little bit of trouble, but I sometimes feel like politically there are folks that want to push a particular type of justice because they want a particular type of outcome. And I think that outcome is steered by that concept I just mentioned, trying to legislate from the bench. And having somebody that's fair and impartial, looks at the law, stays consistent with the law. That's a moderate in that sense. When you think of a conservative judge, I think a lot of people will think about the Supreme Court, and they will think about having their rights taken away. And when they think about a progressive judge, they'll think about the Supreme Court, and they'll think about how the country's going to change because some rule came into effect. But when we're talking about the Court of Appeals, we're talking about the state of New York. I think a moderate judge, a judge that looks at the law, applies the law, and does not try and set precedent and change rulings that affect everybody's lives differently because of something they said or did, I think that's our best shot. I think the governor really made a great choice here.
The governor made a great choice, and I think he'll be a great chief judge. He'll restore confidence in the system. We were one of the premier court system within the United States, and we've lost that. And our reputation has been seriously diminished with the leadership over the last several years. More importantly is the issue that the New York State Senate has a legal obligation, okay, to give him a fair day and listen, question him, ask him questions, listen to his answers. And after you listen to his answers, okay, then you'll see the type of man that he is. And right now, what they're trying to do is, within the Judiciary Committee, they're trying to block him going to a vote of the full Senate. That Judiciary Committee has a legal obligation to vote him out of committee after listening to him, and we elect New York State senators. Let every New York senator have the ability to vote on him. And I believe if he is voted out of committee and it is sent to the floor of the New York State Senate, he will be approved and be confirmed as the next chief judge of the state of New York.
No, I agree. And, that's the function of the committee. The committee is supposed to go in and ask questions and put together informational packets to bring back to the floor so that everyone gets the chance to sit down. All the senators, all the elected get to sit down, review that information, and make a decision. The committee shouldn't be deciding on behalf of the people. It's all of the elected representatives that should be doing so.
Yeah, we have a few state senators now who don't want to give him the opportunity to be heard, and they're trying to have the committee block him from being presented to the entire New York State Senate, and that is an outrage.
Sure, and this is what people don't like about politics. They don't like the idea that their elected representatives go up and play games like this. When you think of a politician, you think of someone playing games like this. When you think of elected representatives, you think of people that go forward, do the job the way they're supposed to, and continue on with the people's work. It's disheartening, I think, that when I talk to folks and they say, well, they're just going to play this game and they're just going to play that game, and this is not going to go through the right way because somebody sitting on a committee, that's what the American people don't like, and especially the people in the state of New York don't like about the political system. And I think you hit the nail on the head. The committee's got to go through, ask their questions, do what they've got to do, then pass along their work to the full floor and let the elected representatives across the state make the decision.
And they need to stop with all the false information they've been distributing to the public about his prior decisions and about his prior work and his prior reputation. They've provided a lot of information that's slanderous out there. And if it was someplace else, they'd be sued for what they've been doing.
Sure.
It's outrageous the way they're handling this, this situation.
No, I agree. And, I saw some cherry picking of cases, right? They didn't go through the body of work. If there was 5,000 cases, they picked 5. And they picked 5 that created the narrative that they wanted to create. If they picked 5 random cases, they probably wouldn't have a leg to stand on. So they looked for cases that would support their narrative. And I believe, again, it's my opinion, I believe they're doing so because they want to steer someone else into that position, and they want someone else in that position to change precedent across the state of New York, whereas I believe that the function of this judge and this particular title should just be to apply the law.
The other thing, a lot of people don't understand that the job of the chief judge is not only to sit onto the Court of Appeals and decide cases in the Court of Appeals. It's to manage the day-to-day operations of the court system throughout the entire state of New York. And it is an enormous organization of staff, of judges, of court officers, of court clerks, interpreters, lawyers, you name it. And we handle so many different things, whether it's dealing with veterans, whether it's dealing with people who are senior citizens who are unable to handle their finances anymore, or whether it's surrogate court where somebody's family has died. So the person has to have an enormous management background in order to do this. And he's been the presiding justice of the appellate division, which is the biggest appellate division and busiest appellate division in the United States. And he's managed that court well. So he has that experience. He not only has the experience as a judge of being fair, and impartial, he has the experience of being a manager. And that is a big, big part of this job, and actually a big, important part of this job. And I don't believe if he's selected for this job, and I expect that he will be, that he will vote. They talk about the Court of Appeals voting as a block, and that they're afraid he's going to vote with other 3 judges on that court who have voted in the past. I don't believe he'll vote with them. He'll vote with the court based on what the law is. He will not be there to make laws. He'll be there to vote on the law. And that's what we want, somebody to manage and somebody to vote on a decision based on the law, existing law, not making law.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, Dennis, that's one of the reasons why it was important for me to have this conversation with you specifically because of all your experience and all your members' experience in the court system. getting that inside track as to what it really means to have this job and what that's going to mean for the court system in general. I mean, this is a position that can turn things around, that can get the wheels of justice moving again. You know, you talked about a little earlier some of the delays and some of the impact that has on everyday people when these delays occur. Getting that stuff managed and under control is very important. But being able to work properly with all of the different employees throughout this court system and getting things handled smoothly and keeping everybody happy and on the job, that is vital as well. I don't want to reiterate too much, but I really think that Justice LaSalle is the right choice here, and I think the governor, did a great job. And I'm disheartened sometimes when I see, the partisanship in Albany, or not even just partisanship, but that agenda where they attempt to control the outcome of a good situation because they want to see a different result. And again, the people, the state of New York, they don't like to see stuff like this happen.
Well, and one thing we didn't touch on is landlord and tenant and foreclosures. Okay,
right,
big issue. Right? I mean, thousands of people are on the verge of being evicted from their homes because they weren't able to pay the mortgage, okay, or they were unable to pay the rent. We need to deal with this issue. We need to help these people. These people are the most vulnerable people of society, and they need to be helped. And Judge LaSalle, if he's put into that position, he will be there for those people day in and day out, and he will make sure that we're able to take care of those people.
Yeah, no, listen, I agree. And, the first half of our conversation this morning, we talked about so many things that were going wrong. The second half talking about so many things that have gone right. But when I get the opportunity, I like to ask any of my guests if there's something, we end up talking about questions I have, things that I'm concerned about. But is there anything that I didn't speak about today that you'd like the public to know?
No, I think that you've covered all of the bases. I think the public needs to, get on the phone to their elected state senator and tell them that they need to give Judge LaSalle a fair hearing. Give him his day in court. Listen to what he has to say. Okay, and after they hear what he has to say, and after they look at his record, there is no reason that he is not confirmed by the New York State Senate and he is not our next chief judge.
I agree, and that's an excellent point. So if you're listening out there, you want to get involved in this issue, you want to see your government work the way it needs to work, then you need to call your local senator and you need to put a word in with them, and you say you want to see the hearing happen with the committee, and then you want to see those results released back to the full Senate and voted on. So Dennis Quirk, President of the New York State Court Officers Association, I want to thank you for joining me this morning. Both you and I are very busy individuals, so I appreciate you, carving out some time and having this conversation. I think it was an important one.
Thank you, Dan. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
And to our listeners, we'll speak to you next week.